Good afternoon, everyone. This is a special Superintendent's Webcast on March 23rd, 2020. The purpose of today's webcast is mainly a question and answer period for you to submit your questions to the gosoapbox.com email address that's at the bottom of your screen with the access code. Our communications director, Tony Cons, is here, and she will be reading the questions. I do want to give just a few minutes of an update, kind of where we are. I know we had the conference call with the governor on Friday, and as everyone knows, school will be closed until April 20th. We certainly hope that we return on April 20th to classes, and we certainly will know how to do school when we return, if we return on April 20th. The questions, though, we're going to be dealing with is, let's pretend we don't return on April 20th. And we need to be planning for that right now, and just in case that does not happen. And as you know, I've asked you over the last week to begin preparing to deliver at least 6 weeks of NTI instruction. We are going to be granting a waiver to you automatically that will give you 30 days of NTI instruction eligibility for the period of March 16th through May 1st. And why 6 weeks of instruction? We're using the May 1st date because there's actually 7 weeks between March 16th, which was the first date that we had that we went to no school because of COVID-19. And there are 7 weeks in the period between March 16th and May 1st. And we know that many of you have spring breaks. It's certainly acceptable to go ahead and recognize your spring break and not have NTI instruction during that week. Many of you are doing that as you recognize there's a need, even though people are already at home, there's a need to not be doing lessons every day, for the teachers to take a little bit of a breather. So just want you to know that we do need you to prepare for 6 weeks of NTI instruction. We're going to give you the legal and regulatory authority to have those days as NTI days. As you know, we requested a waiver through the U.S. Department of Education. I submitted that on Friday night. Received an immediate response from U.S. Department of Ed that night that it had been received and that we would receive an answer within 1 full business day. Since that was submitted Friday night, we fully anticipate receiving the answer from U.S. Department of Education today before close of business, and we certainly hope to get that. I have every reason to believe that our waiver will be granted, meaning that we will not give the K-Prep assessment this year because of the COVID-19 issue, and will not be formulating accountability results because of that. And so everything would just stay constant, including your CSI and TSI designations for the next year until we get into the 2021 school year. Also this afternoon, we have a task force. We're going to have a hard stop today on the superintendent webinar about 1:50 because we are convening the first a virtual meeting of the task force on continuing education. And this task force is designed to give you real-time information back to school districts on issues that the K groups and your co-ops are raising about this unprecedented time. And as we all know, NTI is a great thing, and I'm so proud of all 172 districts for now being NTI districts, and it's the best platform and model we have. However, it was never designed to go 6 weeks straight. It was never designed to go back day to day, day after day after day, without coming back in physically to kind of have a reset. And so we're dealing with all those issues. Let's just pretend, and we hope this is not true, but let's pretend for sake of discussion that we don't come back this semester to physically be present in our schools. One of the things the task force is going to deal with will be, how do we deal with graduation? You're going to need some relief from the State Board of Education, most likely on the graduation requirement regulation. We want to assist you in communications to your seniors. How is that going to work? All of these issues we're thinking about. I know you're thinking about them as well, and what does this mean? And then the other issue I want to put out there is, what does NTI instruction look like past May 1st, assuming we don't go back to school? And is it feasible to continue doing NTI instruction on in to fulfill the rest of our school days to get us up into the 170s? Or do we need to be looking for an alternative to the alternative? And I'm just hearing back from folks anecdotally that doing 6 weeks of NTI instruction through on or around the first part of May is going to be a challenging task. And so we recognize that. Part of the task force will be to look at that issue. How can we serve kids during this time, be it through NTI or be it after May 1st if we don't come back to various enrichment programs, or making sure that we communicate with kids about resources that may be available to them throughout May and throughout the summer through KET or other resources. Again, these are all hypotheticals, but things we need to plan on, because we need to be making decisions right now that could affect us if we don't go back to school on April 20th. And we all hope we go back to school. And this is just treated like a very long blizzard, but we have to be prepared in case that does not happen. And I also want to, before we get into the questions, want to leave with you what I've been telling staff here at the department. And we know we have to be nimble to respond to the needs of this crisis. And so I'm using 3 words to tell KDE staff what we need to do over the next few weeks and months. The first word is educate. We have an obligation at the department to support you as you educate and support your kids during this time. That's the most important thing we can do at the department, and we are shifting resources and the efforts of individuals here to make sure we can provide that support. And one of the examples of that support is the task force that will happen today at 2 o'clock to help you think through those issues with your co-op directors, members of the K groups, and we also have some individuals from the Chamber of Commerce and others that are going to be helping us work through those issues. The second word is feed. We have a very, very big obligation, an important obligation, as the governor has said, to use the resources and the infrastructure that we have in our school districts to feed students using the federal programs that we have, such as summer feeding. And I know many of you were not involved in summer feeding up until this crisis began, and you have applied to be summer feeding program participants, so that will enable you to deliver food or have food picked up that's prepared in your facilities for students during this time. And that is very, very important that we do that. It's important that the summer feeding program continue to grow, particularly this summer. Even if we go back to school on April 20th, there's going to be economic disruption that will continue on through the summer. Our families will be facing lost jobs, as we're already seeing just in the unemployment numbers. And it is crucial that we maximize the summer feeding program and maximize federal dollars that can come in here to assist with reimbursement for the cost of food that we can send to our students during this time of need. So the first word, again, is educate. The second word is feed. And the third word, for lack of a better word, is pay. We have an obligation at the state to do everything in our authority and power to hold you harmless as a school district. That's the way the General Assembly is currently thinking about this. That's the way the governor's thinking about this, and that's the way that we are thinking about it at the department and at the State Board of Education, meaning that our intention is to ensure that as much as we can do legally and constitutionally, we want to make sure you receive the same amount of funds that you received last year, even though we are now entering into an unprecedented time of not holding in-person classes. That in turn means that we need you to think outside the box about how you can make sure every person in your school districts continue to get paid for services rendered. And you may ask yourself, well, how can I do that when I can't put every bus driver to work? How can I do that when I'm only operating one cafeteria for summer feeding instead of all 4? We already have school districts out there and co-ops out there that are thinking of very creative ways to ensure that we get every contract day to every employee. And that could be in the form of training, that could be in the form of both looking through manuals, reading, virtual opportunities, and we're going to be delivering to you, and your co-ops are going to pledge to me today during a conference call that they're going to be doing the same thing to ensure that we have the ability to have every employee render some type of service for the school district so that we continue to can flow state monies to you, and that you can continue to pay these individuals. That is our goal, and that's what we're going to work towards. If we don't get everything we need in legislation or the budget bill when the General Assembly adjourns April 15th, the governor has been very clear that he will use his authority through executive orders to get us where we need to be to make sure that we hold you harmless and that we make sure we don't have a significant financial disruption in the lives of all your employees in your school districts. That doesn't mean these decisions will be easy. There will not be a one-size-fits-all for every person, every district, but we're going to work together as an education community to solve these problems and get the information to you that you need so that we can come out on the other side of this and hopefully begin a new school year in August, and we can all be back in class and things can return to normal. So Tony is here and receiving your questions, and we'll go ahead and get started with the question and answer period.
Okay, our first question, and we have 7 people who have asked this question, is pertaining to certified and classified evaluations. If they are not yet complete for the current year, what are they supposed to do?
That's a very good question. We are compiling all of the due dates, all of the requirements that you would normally have on you in a school district if we were in session. And we know that there has to be waivers of those deadlines, be it statutory or regulatory. Our legal office, we're compiling all of those, and then we are going to be asking the state board to the extent we need to get assistance from the General Assembly before they leave, and then in anything else we'll catch up through an executive order to give you relief on that. My guidance to you right now is just to recognize what deadlines you have, what things you need to get done, and just know that we're going to be giving you guidance that you can't do some of these things when you have you don't have everybody in your building. You can be creative though, and we can help work you through that if you have folks that are telecommuting, and you can do follow up with them about evaluations, perhaps using technology. But as a general statement, we believe all those things we'll give you guidance on that they'll be waived and dates pushed off into the future.
Should the shutdown extend for the remainder of the school year and possibly into summer, will the May 15th deadline for non-renewal and reduction letters still be in place?
All deadlines are on the table to be extended based upon what we're dealing with. I can't say for sure, but I can tell you that we're looking at every deadline. We just had a discussion about this in leadership team this morning, and we'll be giving guidance out hopefully within the next 10 days about how we're going to be dealing with all these statutory and regulatory deadlines.
How will transportation be funded for NTI days? Transportation funding will be lost is a concern.
I'm actually going to ask Robin Kinney to address that's a common question we're getting about transportation funding during NTI days, and she's here with us around the table. And would make a note, we are all at least 6 feet apart in the state boardroom. There are only 6 of us in the large state boardroom. And I asked you by email, superintendents, last week to be models of this in your districts and in your communities as well. I saw a great video of folks in our food service in a school district, and they were doing a song. The song was great. The only problem with the video is they were standing shoulder to shoulder on an assembly line putting meals together. And so, that was an example of we need to do a little bit better modeling of doing social distancing. And so I want to encourage you all to be leaders of that in your communities. So, Robin?
Thank you. This is a question that we are receiving repeatedly from local school districts, and it's important that we understand that with the uncertainty around this is something that is at the forefront of our discussions. We understand that you're not operating business as usual, therefore you are not transporting students on your buses, but you're using your bus drivers for other activities. One option that is being considered, in addition to lots of other options, is to basically look at how do we hold school districts harmless in transportation as well as SEEK and all the other components by looking backwards to the 18-19 school year. This has not been accepted by the General Assembly yet, but it has been proposed. It would then allow districts to use that as the basis for planning going forward, and would give you the benefit of knowing that whatever amounts that you had for the 18-19 school year for transportation or any other components of SEEK, you would have that available. Some districts are also using school bus drivers to deliver food under the USDA programs for summer feeding. I want to make a clarification because some of you have not worked with summer feeding before, so it's important that we understand this clarifying point. Under the summer feeding program, districts get basically revenue that comes in, reimbursements on a per meal amount. So if you're serving breakfast, you get a per meal amount. If you're serving lunch, you get a per meal amount. That is your revenue that is coming in from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. However, your expenses, there are eligible expenses that you can use those dollars for. And I want to be very clear, this is not for every dollar you expend, you get reimbursed. You get reimbursed revenue based upon a per meal cost, and then you can apply that toward your expenditures. Bus drivers and the cost of your bus drivers, just like your other food service staff, is an eligible expense. So it's permissible to use that for those costs. However, really clear, it's not a dollar for dollar match of your expenditures that go out the door. So we have to look at both the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the program, and the dollars that are available there, and then also your SEEK funding that will come in. I think we all wish we had a crystal ball that we could know what that looks like. But to echo Commissioner Brown's comments, our position is we will advocate for every dollar from whatever source to make school districts as whole as possible. So our goal is to hold you harmless so that your staff gets paid, food is delivered, and instruction can continue.
Thank you, Robin. I would add to that, some of the bills that are being considered by Congress have provisions in them saying that in order for states to get funding from the United States government for this, and school districts to receive some relief funds, that states must continue to pay all staff members in school districts. So everyone is in agreement. The Congress understands that school districts are drivers of local economies, and we don't want school district employees having to turn around and seek unemployment. There are services that they can provide. We can be creative on trainings and other services they can provide to get them through their contracts, and we're going to be helping you with that. And so the U.S. Congress is signaling they understand it. Governor Beshear has said the same thing in his addresses, the press conferences. He said that to the superintendents on the call. I have said it, and we're also getting signals from the General Assembly that they also understand that and they will support that. I did hear from at least one superintendent saying they would like to see what was said on the conference call by Governor Beshear and myself on Friday in writing so they can rely on that. And the superintendent implied that there's not always been, I guess, a trust factor among superintendents with state government or maybe even the Department of Ed. And I can tell you that we will certainly put anything you need in writing of what we said here today, but I can tell you, I know Governor Beshear, he is going to be true to his word. He's going to use every ounce of authority that he has as governor through his executive order power to make sure that we get through this and that we don't harm our school districts. So I can certainly make that pledge to you here today.
Okay, our next question is planning instruction going forward. Would it be possible to go ahead now and cancel in-person classes for the remainder of the year? We have been an NTI district for several years, but want to transition to an online platform.
Repeat the first part of the question.
They were wondering, planning instruction going forward, would it be possible to go ahead now and cancel in-person classes for the remainder of the year?
You know, and that's been, I'm sure, discussed with public health and the governor's office. I know at least one state, I believe Kansas, has called in-person classes off for the rest of the year. However, I think their school calendar may be a little different than ours anyway. I think the governor wants to be as optimistic as possible, hoping that we can be back in in-person classes on April 20th. On the other hand, you know, we are planning just go ahead and plan to have, as I said earlier, to have 6 weeks of non-traditional instruction. That would get us to May 1st. And then if we move in that direction, we will have to make a decision here as to whether we want to continue NTI instruction past the 6 weeks on into May to finish out the year under all of your calendars, or whether we want to deliver some type of an alternative instruction to NTI through enrichment or other means, knowing that is going to be a heavy lift to do the 6 weeks of instruction through NTI as we anticipate. So I understand that, and in many ways it would enable us to plan if we did go ahead and call it. On the other hand, we're going to go ahead and we already know how to do school on April 20th if we go back, so we don't need to plan for that. We know how to come back. But let's just go ahead and start planning right now for the 6 weeks of NTI instruction through May 1st.
Do you have any guidance on the assignment of student grades during NTI?
That's the type of instruction or feedback and guidance we want to give to you after this first task force meeting. That's going to be, I feel sure, a topic of discussion that Dr. Ellis is going to facilitate in this task force meeting. That goes along with, how do we handle seniors who will be graduating this year, and all of that will be forthcoming from the department.
Is there any discussion on the implications of this to the KEYS money that's seniors?
That is certainly on our list. We fully anticipate that we will have seniors graduating in every school district this year. We got to work with you on how all that gets done and documented, and hopefully they will be walking across a stage somewhere at some point this year. And so that will occur. We are still, though, looking into and researching issues such as KEYS and how any impact that it would have on that.
Just to clarify, no matter how many NTI days we use prior to March 16th, we need to plan for additional 30 NTI days that began on March 16th?
That's correct. I know for some of you that could be upwards of 40 days, or could be at least or I guess at the most 40 days, because some of you have used, I think I heard 8 or 9 of those 10 days due to flu, and we did have some weather in some parts of the state since December, and so I do realize that would be for some of you close to 40 NTI days, but we need to reassure the public, the taxpayers, the General Assembly, and parents that we're doing everything in our power to continue instruction, even though it's through non-traditional means. And so that's why we are going ahead and advising you to begin preparations and continue preparations for 6 weeks of instruction between the period of March 16th through May 1st, which is actually a 7-week period.
We are being asked by local health agencies for items such as gloves and hand sanitizer. Do you recommend that we give these items to those requesting?
We are doing something similar, and for example, this weekend we went through the area technology center buildings to gather up extra N95 masks, gowns, and other protective protective equipment that we have there just for the operation of those programs in normal times, and we provided those to the Department of Public Health. We are keeping a log of any items like that are donated, so we can hopefully seek reimbursement for the state from FEMA or other sources that may become available. I would encourage you all to do a similar process. If your local health department, if they are asking you for these items and they are in fact an excess item that you have, I believe we do need to respond to the need as identified by public health during times of an emergency, but you should keep a record of what you're distributing or giving to another state agency so that we could then, when all this is accounted for, seek reimbursement from the appropriate source or grant that would become available.
One superintendent has stated, I'm concerned about equity provided to employees, some working, some are not, as recommended by the governor to keep folks employed and paychecks coming, as he mentioned with state workers.
You've identified a number one issue. I read an article in the New York Times last night that talked about how you see all these pictures on social media of folks who have jobs that are based upon using the computer, sometimes referred to as white-collar jobs, and they're sitting there with their dog and their families and having hot chocolate and working, while then there are other employees that don't have that luxury, and they have to go to the factory, to go into the cafeterias to cook meals, to do things to keep society going as well. And so there's an obvious conflict between those job classifications, and it is an issue. We want to be as creative as possible. I know I'm hearing stories about how you are already being creative and how you're utilizing your employees. I spoke with the chief of staff of a school district on Friday, developing plans for training for classified employees that maybe won't be able to come in physically, perhaps, but they could do training to then justify paying them on a contract day. These are all the things that we're going to be creative about and pass ideas along from district to district, co-op to co-op, and then we want to also give you guidance on how you can do that with the goal of getting to June 30th with every employee fulfilling their contract, even though it may look completely different on how they fulfilled their contract. They may not walk back on a bus from now until June 30th, but you may in fact have some things for them to do that would justify their services to the public. So and it is a foreign concept. I know a lot of it you've had to get out of your comfort zone. I know your local boards of education have had to get out of their comfort zones, just visualizing and not understanding how a teacher can telecommute, or maybe how the payroll clerk at the central office can telecommute, and knowing that not physically being present in the office is okay when work is being conducted at an off-site location, and it's a lot of adjustment for you, and we understand that. But I just urge you to think outside the box, be as creative as you can. The point is to make sure we're getting services that we need out of our employees, even though it may look differently in how they're getting it done.
We've had a couple of questions that are related to the summer or to the feeding over spring break. Are they supposed to continue feeding over spring break? Typically, they have not gotten paid for that. Maybe Robin, you can.
Yeah, so if you intend on feeding over spring break, that has been granted, that waiver's been granted, so you can do that and seek reimbursement. But if you want to take a break, then that's up to you. But we encourage you to think about continuation of services to make sure that those kids continue to get fed.
And I would add to that, if you normally, obviously on your normal spring break, you would not normally provide food if that would be the case. But, for example, maybe before spring break you would provide a backpack service to kids the Friday before spring break to give them food. To the extent you can continue those types of services to students, if you're not going to be providing food over spring break, then we encourage you to continue that. And some of you do that with community partners and other resources.
Could KDE mandate pass or fail grades for all high school courses to allow for consistency across the state?
We're looking at all options to make sure we do have as much normalcy and consistency, particularly for our seniors this year. And so we're evaluating that, and that's, as I said, going to be one of the topics of discussion on today's task force. I would defer maybe to Dr. Amanda Ellis, I think is able to take questions on the virtual meeting that we have set up alongside. Is that correct?
Yes.
Dr. Ellis?
Are you able to... Hello?
I don't hear.
As I said,
Okay. Hello, guys. This is Amanda Ellis.
Dr.
As far
Ellis?
as grades go, we are looking into that. That is typically a local control, but we do know that for the 2020 graduates, it will be a unique setting or situation for them, and so that is definitely a topic that is going to be on the top of our list for determining what we need to do to not penalize these students for this situation. Nobody would have ever guessed it to be this way. One of the things we're even looking at is even the credits that they need, what minimum requirements are per the law compared to local policy, and then what the recommendation would be for that. And so that is the topic that we'll be bringing up with the task force to give recommendations, and we will have better clarification on the actual grading policy, since that is very typically local. But I understand the need for consistency, so we will follow up with that. But that is top on our list to be considered our graduates first on what we need to do to ensure that they're not penalized for this unique situation.
Thank you, Dr. Ellis, for what I think was a wonderful answer. We couldn't hear you in the state boardroom, but I trust that all of you heard Dr. Ellis's answer out there in our school districts. We're still, as all of you are, I know you are working through the technology. I know many of you have already had a state or a board meeting, a local board meeting, virtually. We had a state board meeting. And, you know, these are issues we're all kind of working through the technical difficulties, but everybody's kind of in the same boat. So thank you, everyone, for bearing with us when we do have those technical difficulties.
And we certainly appreciate your questions. We do have several more. The next question is, what is the plan for ADA for the remainder of the year, average daily attendance for the remainder of the year?
If that question is directed about payments for SEEK payments, then that has already been determined. You will get your SEEK payments on a monthly basis, just like you always do. SEEK was finalized effective March 1st. We are still waiting to see what happens with any excess, and if the General Assembly chooses to act on that, we will then add that if it is directed to come to local school districts in the manner in which it is directed to be provided.
With NTI now serving a purpose much different for which original NTI plans were written, has there been any updated guidance for the amount of work students should be assigned and how much contact teachers need to have with students each day or week?
I'll defer to, I think Kelly Foster is on our team meeting, then she can respond to that.
Good afternoon. I'm actually going to defer to David Cook, but I do want to take this the time to thank all of you for your hard work with the NTI. The veteran districts out there, you all are doing a great job, and to the new districts, we know this is a lot of information in a real quick amount of time. But we really appreciate your effort.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Kelly. Yes, there's going to be a much more streamlined process for both accumulating participation of students and also evidence of work. We will be sharing that. We're working on some resource tools for you, the forms that you will fill out. A lot less for you to do for the emergency process that we're going through. And tomorrow morning at 11, we'll be having a documentation and evidence webinar, or actually Teams meeting for all of you all. And we should have all the forms ready by then. So we'll talk in detail about what those look like. I just don't have them in front of me, but rest assured, this is streamlining down to more of an overall process as we move forward on collecting participation and evidence of learning. I hope that answers the question. If not, I can go further.
All right, our next question. Will food service be reimbursed based on prior year numbers, or will we be penalized for decreased participation?
At this time, you will be reimbursed based upon your current activity. We continue every day to seek additional waivers from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, but that one has not been granted as yet. So because food service is operated out of the U.S. Department of Ag at the federal level and is not tied to the state allocation, then we rely upon their guidance and direction. So for right now, until a waiver is granted, it will be based upon your current levels.
I can't hear.
Why?
I'm just,
team said they can't hear.
Maybe it's just the team.
okay.
Okay. Should I go to the next question? Okay. There is a form that we are required to get signed for any home deliveries of meals. That is going to be extremely difficult as many of our parents do not come out with the child to get lunch. Is there any type of relief that you can provide for that?
We are seeking a waiver on that as well because, in fact, I was just on a call with the U.S. Department of Agriculture right before jumping on this meeting. And there were requests from lots of states asking about this requirement to make sure that either parents were home and appearing with their children. So I think there's still going to be some need for additional flexibility, which we did hear positive comments back from USDA. So we'll continue to work on that additional flexibility. Right now, we don't have it.
Is anybody thinking that there may be a possibility of not being able to come back in August? Are districts pushing the 2021 school year start into September?
That's something that I don't even really want to think about. So we're going to focus on this year. I haven't heard that in any form or fashion discussed in any meetings we've had here with public health or anybody else. But I do think, it is always wise in this kind of a new normal that we need to be thinking about different ways of doing things. And particularly I would focus us on the summer. What does it look like when, kids, let's say we don't go back this school year, what does it look like when they've not been in a classroom since, March the 13th? And then go into the summer. And we really need to be thinking about what kind of enrichments we can provide kids over the summer to address the summer slide that we know will occur. It occurs every year, even if we don't miss a lot of school. So we need to be thinking, my recommendation, let's think about the summer, and with the understanding and belief that we'll be back in school and in-person classes in August.
Will there be direction given on using buses and drivers to distribute meals, given the governor recommending we minimize contact?
I think at this point in time, we're still very supportive, and the governor is very supportive of making sure that we feed children to the extent possible. Bus drivers, just like your food service staff, are important if you have set up a system that your methodology requires that to happen. We would encourage you to continue to think of other ways for a very sustainable process for delivery of meals. So you might be delivering door to door right now. That may not be sustainable for as long as we might need to go. So you might start out with one methodology and one delivery system, and then you may need to change or tweak that as you roll along. But for bus drivers and food service people that are doing that or on the front line right now, we are so appreciative of that. We will also include some information on our school and community nutrition site just to help with direction and guidance on safety and health and delivering in the proper way possible. That, of course, is information that is provided from our Department of Public Health. They are the business experts in that area.
And again, I think this has been addressed, but it's been asked again. Should we allow all workers possible to work from home to cut down on numbers inside the building?
Yes, we need to be as creative as possible. While it is certainly permissible for you to have teachers to come in to perform NTI duties, and all the teachers immediately just go to their classroom and they're separated by classroom, and you don't have any in-person meetings, and you're exhibiting social distancing, and you have hand sanitizer and plenty of hand wash, soap and towels in the bathroom. Yes. However, that's an additional 20 to 25 individuals in an elementary school. And so knowing that teachers can telecommute to provide NTI services. That's perfectly acceptable and contemplated by the NTI statute and regulation. There's really no need to have them in the building. So go ahead and reduce, I call it reducing the load of the building on personnel, and get those 25 folks not in your building to just reduce the possibility that they might not observe the 6-foot distance between individuals. You're going to have individuals in your building preparing food, and that's necessary. We hope to be providing you additional guidance as we go along from public health on how you can maintain social distancing and any other protective measures that food service workers may want to need to engage in when they're in the cafeteria. We will make sure we're getting you that information, the best information possible from public health, and we'll pass that along when we get it. I did have a question last night on text from a superintendent about whether or not bus drivers and food service workers are deemed essential. And I think that was because the governor came out last night in the press conference talking about non-essential businesses. And he's talking there about not governmental entities, but for-profit businesses and other non-governmental entities that were not essential had to be closed. And government is not included in that. We are essential. And some governmental services are more essential than others. But to the extent you're having your custodial staff to come in to continue deep cleaning, that's essential. A cafeteria staff in to continue to come in to produce food for summer feeding, that's essential. There may be a need for your NTI teachers to come in, particularly if you're processing packets of information, if not all of your NTI is being done virtually, which we know that not all of it is. And that's one of the benefits of Kentucky's NTI program, is we never contemplated in Kentucky that it would all be done virtually. And that's why I think we're ahead of a lot of states. But to the extent you need to bring in some teachers to process the packets of NTI, that's fine. Just make sure you're utilizing all the social distancing, that you're taking those precautions, that they're not congregating in a room together, and making sure you're just taking those precautions. And then another question from a superintendent related to all this is, are there issues when papers come back and forth from those conducting NTI instruction using the packets, the papers having COVID-19 virus on the papers, either from the home back to the teacher or from the teacher back to the home? We don't have an answer to that. We're reaching out to our public health experts on that, and we'll be putting that in the frequently asked questions and guidance.
There's a comment here about they are not in favor of pass-fail grades for students, as this would impact keys. Our students are doing work as the same as in the classroom, and that would not be fair. Followed up by who is on the task force. I hope there are superintendent reps as well as each part of the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Very, very good comment. We will certainly take that into consideration.
Should we continue planning to have 21st century summer programs?
I believe that is in Kelly's shop.
It's a great question, and that's one of those things that is unknown. I hope that by the time summer rolls around that we will be able to have the 21st century programs, and I think we will need them more than ever, probably for remediation. So at this time, I think it's okay to continue to plan for that, but that is something that we'll put on our radar and try to continue to update you as we get closer to June.
And related to that, again, think about, let's just say, for instance, that we can't have those programs due to the ongoing COVID-19 issue. What does that look like in trying to provide services in an alternative format to the kids that would have taken advantage of that in some of your facilities? And, it may be that we need to continue to get waivers from the grantees of any grant funds we're receiving for programs like that. Let's all continue to try to think outside the box with the goal of continuing to support kids through education and support services through the summer.
What is the likelihood that May 1st would be the last day for this school year? Or what is the likelihood that face-to-face school would be back by that date or would go or would NTI go beyond May 1st?
I can't speculate as to the likelihood. I know we are planning just based upon what we are all just hearing in the press conferences and the what's going on around the world. And if you apply for example, you apply what's been going on in Italy, the time frame there with the time frame here. I mean, we can all just assume that we may be going into May with continuing with virtual instruction, or at least to May 1st. The May 1st date is a date I just basically came up with myself, looking at 6 weeks of NTI instruction, talking with many of you, talking with our folks here at the department as to how much can we sustain to continue doing. And so that's why I mentioned earlier in the program about what does it look like after May 1st? That's a discussion we're going to need to have. Do we need to switch to a different type of alternative instruction to finish out the year? Is it more enrichment based? Is it more based on trying to identify the needs of students to get them caught up on certain things, more remedial in nature? You know, those are all the things that we're going to be discussing in the next few days.
Can you clarify, Can you clarify the emergency day legislation that was passed last week? Do they need to apply for this, or is this something that already is there for them to use?
At this point in time, there's not emergency days that have been granted by the General Assembly as yet. So we'll continue to monitor that to see what happens. But at this point in time, that is just a proposal still.
Can we pursue a waiver for both state and federal grants to spend beyond the typical September guidelines to have funds encumbered?
I feel for federal grants, we're still getting direction. We participated in a call, CCSSO, the Council for Chief State School Officers, is looking at that, trying to really collectively across the nation, trying to advocate on behalf of states for extensions or the ability to use federal funds for a longer period of time than what they were originally allotted for. And from the state perspective, we will look at that issue as well.
We have considered amending our school calendar to not have spring break and continue using NTI days to ensure continuation of services. This would mean 35 days of NTI instructions before May 1st. Is that permissible?
It certainly is permissible, and if you think that that meets the needs of your community, then you're certainly permitted to do that. And we have about 3 more minutes, I think, before we need to sign off into the task force meeting.
Okay. Another follow-up question on classified employees. Should we have all classified employees work from home, even if their job can't really be done from home, such as custodians?
You're going to be hearing from your co-ops and other districts, if you haven't already, about creative ways where we are going to be able to get training opportunities for classified employees that traditionally would only come in to physically do their job in the school building. That's one of the conversation I mentioned I had with a chief of staff from Jefferson County Schools last week about some of the creative options that they are looking into to make sure that we are getting some benefit and some needed training to classified staff that may not otherwise be able to be accomplished just because we don't have time to do it. Now, that raises issues such as access to technology, whether or not those individuals had the access through a laptop or through an internet connection, and whether or not you would have to provide paper copies. You know, those are all the things we'll have to work through. But there are districts working through that. We want to make sure we're sharing and all of those innovative ideas that are coming so all districts can utilize those ideas as we move forward. We're going to need to transition over. I think we still have a few more questions. We will answer those through the Q&A document. And I did want to tell you that feel free to continue to text me. Many of you say, I'm sorry to bother you. It is no bother. I want to apologize, though. I don't always get to respond to your text message in a timely manner, and so we want to continue to do that. And we are forwarding a lot of your questions to folks at the department who then in turn will email you. I didn't know when we provided to you the list of all the KDE leadership team members and their personal phone numbers several weeks ago that we would actually have a huge need for you to be able to utilize that, and so now you have that. If you already know you have an assessment question, and you can obviously ask me, but if you know that it's an assessment question, feel free to text or call Rhonda Sims, for example. So we want to make sure you are a primary customer here. We appreciate what you all are doing there on the front lines. I can't say enough how proud I am to work alongside you and with you. And we want to make sure we are giving you everything that you need. So we are going to try to do these webinars weekly in a question and answer format. We'll obviously get out to you information that is more urgent in nature through an email, a direct email to you. But I believe this is helpful for everyone, and it also helps us work through the questions. So again, we are populating a Q&A document, and you can continue to have your staff look at that on the KDE website. And please hang in there, and thank you for everything that you're doing for all of our kids around the state. Thank you.